Greetings, welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. My name is Jeff, and guess who's here? It's Richard
Hello.
and Michael.
Howdy.
And this time around, we got a no-holds-barred look at the second careers of wrestlers. This is a topic that when you go visit the Mount Rushmore podcast website and hit the tag wrestler or wrestling, it'll come up with all the many other times we've talked about wrestlers and wrestling.
When you make the tag.
When you make the tag, I gotta take the
Correct.
tag. I gotta go tag everything. That'll be my New Year's resolution. We'll need a team to make the tag, a tag team, if you will. And these are wrestlers who tagged out of one career and into another. And Richard is going to be the first person to let us know his choice.
All right. So my first choice is one of the more surprising ones when it happened, and that is Jesse the Body Ventura becoming Jesse the Governor Ventura.
Also on my list.
All right.
Well, it has to be. I mean, one of the weirdest. We'll never have somebody as unqualified as Jesse Ventura become.
No.
We reach high political office in this country again. Now, 1998, I was working at the newspaper at the Orange County Register, and election night we had the coverage up in the newsroom on the TVs, and Jesse Ventura was not expected to win. He was a third-party candidate. He had a lot less money than his opponents, and even in the polls, he was expected at best to finish second. And I just remember the news flash coming on the ticker that said Jesse, and they may have even in quotes said the Body Ventura, projected to win Minnesota governor's seat, and my jaw just dropped. I mean, of all the wrestlers, even the wrestlers who win political office, the guy with the feather boa, that guy. Now, I have some friends who live in Minnesota, and according to them, he was actually a pretty decent. He was a pretty decent governor, kind of in that same way that Schwarzenegger was, where even if you're a Democrat, you're like, he could have been worse, that sort of thing.
I read that he had really screwed up like the state's budget surplus and wasn't all that great, but he wasn't like offensive in the way that like
Trump was.
I don't think he was trying to kill anybody. I just think he was just like
he's kind of a dope,
big
kind of a
libertarian / Green Party guy that was like, go do your own thing, which I think a lot of people really caught into that kind of idea of like, oh yeah, well, why not this huge muscular guy, ex-Marine, yelling at me? Okay, well, that's fine.
I mean, yes, he did get into office with a $3 million budget surplus, and he did leave with a $4.2 million budget deficit. But math gets a little fuzzy sometimes, and who knows? Yeah. But he wasn't as I guess. I just remember people thinking that Minnesota might actually be. We might have to sell Minnesota to the Canadians by the end of his term. That's how bad things were going to get. So even mild incompetence, I think, is better than what I remember people thinking it was going to be at the time.
Him. Go ahead, Rich, Jeff.
Oh, I moved to Minnesota in fall of 1998. So this is the backdrop of my arrival. What I tell people, I know I've said
you had to change your nickname from Jeff the Body Hopkins. Oh, sorry.
Well, I think it's So when I arrived, the other third party was Fancy Ray McCloney. So comparatively, Jesse Ventura was normal compared to Fancy Ray McCloney, who was quote unquote the people's champion. So I remember at the time thinking, on the spectrum, there was already a more outlier of a candidate in the third party. But what was goofy about it is I moved to California in 2004, and when I moved in '98 to Minnesota, the number one newscaster was Paul Major, and he was like the David Brinkley of Minnesota, and the governor became Jesse Ventura. When I moved to California, the number one newscaster was Paul Major, who had moved to California and Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor. So the cast of The Running Man was following me around wherever I went. But the time I got to actually direct Jesse Ventura in a kind of PSA video for libraries or something like that.
Really?
And this was the of the time. It was a Matrix spoof, so we know what time this was. And he was absolutely a very authoritative, gubernatorial type of guy, you know. But you could still see that he had kind of his movie roots because, you know, he would toss around, you know, movie set terms and stuff like that. But when he wasn't, after he cut his hair, after he took off the boa and all that kind of stuff, he was a pretty just stoic kind of guy. And a makeup artist who worked in Minnesota, speaking of like the Jesse Arnold connection, said that he was Arnold's makeup artist on Batman Forever or whatever, where Mr. Fee was Mr. Freeze, and he said at that point Schwarzenegger said, "If that idiot can do it, I can do it." And so let's just say Jesse was an inspiration.
And just to circle back to our topic here in terms of being a wrestler's second career, this was
Yeah.
really his third career at this point, because as you mentioned, he had a fairly distinguished, I mean, from action movie guy standards,
Yeah.
acting career. And I think it all goes back to the fact that he was, as a wrestler, he was known as he was known more for his ability to cut a promo
Oh.
than he was for his wrestling ability, I would say. And that's why after he got injured in the early to mid 80s and really couldn't wrestle anymore, they transitioned him to be a commentator, and became one of the best commentators of his era. And I think I just wonder if that how much that plays a part in being able to speak extra, kind of off the cuff at political events, debates, things like that. Just being good on the microphone and being able to cut a promo and being able to get yourself in these back and forth situations with when you're interacting with other wrestlers where you don't have a script and it's all basically a form of improv. And I just wonder how much that actually helps you as a politician as you're running for office and going through your motions as governor to be able to do that.
Richard, do you have a certain demon from hell type character as mayor on your list as well?
No, I do not.
Okay. Well, uh, this isn't my second choice, but I want to bring up Kane, who is
Oh
a
yeah.
wrestler who has also like the mayor of like Knox County, Tennessee. And I love the idea of these guys, Jesse and the Body Ventura included, where they must get questions from people who don't know it's all fake, right? Or like from a candidate that they're opposing who like starts questioning like the things either they did in the ring or like with Kane, like, do you really want a governor that's put someone in a fiery casket and like tried to burn them alive? And like the guy just to stand up there and what was his name, Glenn Jacobs, to be like, that's not real, right? I mean, there's got to be someone that for specifically for like Jesse Ventura that like believes whatever they have seen in the ring or like the feather boa stuff or like whatever is like, no, I remember I saw him in 1979 and he poked this guy's in the eye. And we can't trust this guy. He's gonna
Yeah.
go behind this. I love that idea that there are people that are just clinging on that will never not know, with these big personality wrestlers turned politician guys.
Well, do you think Reagan opened the door for some of these
Sure.
people? Because Reagan was
Absolutely.
ultimately, I think Reagan's image as a film star was a very athletic one. Newt Rockney, All American, that kind of, and it wasn't necessarily like Gary Cooper, as Lou Gehrig, had this kind of somber kind of mentality about it. I think Reagan had that just kind of fresh scrubbed kind of big, hulking kind of football kind of dude identity. And so I almost feel like that was a step in
I
the
think there's
direction.
just I think there's just an aspect of just name recognition. I mean, God, 6 years ago we were joking about Trump just because everybody knew his name, and a
Yeah.
certain percentage of people probably voted for him because they recognize the name or the brand identity. I mean, how many people still write in Mickey Mouse or
Mhm.
whatever nonsense they're going to do? But if you see a name, you're not offended by said person. You see Jesse the Body Ventura or just Jesse Ventura, and you recognize that name, and you're like, I don't really care. I'm going to vote. I mean, is
Yeah.
that 5,000 votes in a, statewide? Is it
Mhm.
however many that may put you over? I don't know uh, what his winning percentage was, but there must be just, I know that name. I'll vote for that name versus Carl Smith. That doesn't mean anything to me. Or
Yeah.
whoever. I think that for a lot of people like that,
Fuck
uh,
Carl Smith.
he should he shouldn't have thrown that guy in that fiery casket.
No, he shouldn't have done
Carl the demon Smith. But I
that.
think that there are just the celebrity in um, whatever venue they become a celebrity can turn into political juice.
Yeah, I think definitely. Jesse predates because I think he might have even had a radio show. I know he had one after his
Mhm.
governorship, but predates in a way the Joe Rogan and well the emergence of the kind of right wing or almost white fundamentalist kind of talk personality as a person who is purporting to represent the anti-intellectual or this person who feels outside of the mainstream and the person who maybe have a kind of anti-intellectual bent um, and I definitely think that was a direction that the Ventura or something Ventura was capitalizing on. I saw Ventura campaigning at the state fair. So like the state fair is like the great Minnesota get together where people from all the rural areas of this huge state come together and you need like Richard said, you need to get over. Like you need to really get over on that crowd and these other politicians with their ties and their rolled up sleeves and their little brochures and things like that. You can't compete with Jesse Ventura in that ring. Well, was Kane on your list, Michael?
No, no, no.
Okay.
I thought, God, I just have one politician on here, but I kept thinking of like the parallels of personality and the parallels of just idiots who believe that what they see in the ring is
Yeah.
what is real life. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kane, uh, when doing my little bit of research, he's got an Allstate. He and his wife own an Allstate agency, and I
Mm.
can really see him um, threatening people like with insurance that might cover things that one doesn't normally encounter on a day to day
You
basis. Like,
Yeah,
need fire insurance. No,
yeah,
I'm serious. You need fire insurance.
double hand, double hand axe chops,
yeah,
lariats,
atomic knee drop.
sidewalk slams,
You
all of
never know
those.
when an Oklahoma roll is going to come out of. Okay, well, that was also one of your choices, Jesse Ventura. So, Michael, what is your second choice?
My second, and this was initially my first, and I think this was just the kind of the no doubt about it. Dwayne, in
Oh yeah,
parentheses, The
yeah,
Rock, not in parentheses, in quotation marks, The Rock Johnson, because I think he has been the most successful of all like wrestlers turned actors. I don't think he's really gone back to wrestling uh, in a heavy-handed way, the way that a lot of people do. He's done a couple of like stints, but I would say that at this point in his career, he's probably as famous for being a action movie star as he was for being a wrestler.
yeah,
His wrestling career ended what, maybe 10 years ago, maybe less, I don't really know for sure, but he's really transitioned into this big kind of brand. He's 50 years old now, which is wild. I don't know if I think that's young or old. I'm not quite sure for like how I think of him, because I think he's this weird, almost ageless. He's always kind of looked the same way. He's this gigantic hulk of a human. Um, but you know, it feels weird to have acting as a second career when wrestling is an acting sort of career anyway. But
Right.
I think that like some people have really done it very successfully. Some people have done it not so successfully. Some people have done it with cameos, and some people have. And then there's The Rock, who is just in the stratosphere all to himself as a someone that really, um, has been so successful at. He's. It's interesting because like it's not like his movies are the biggest box office blowouts. Maybe save for
Mhm.
him kind of coming onto the Fast and Furious franchise, but like I don't know, the movie Rampage. Let's say that based on a video game, that was probably an 80-90 million dollar movie that probably made 200, if that,
I'm
180.
going to look that up right now because
Like
I'm
what's the,
curious.
yeah, like, but like those are the types of movies he makes. They make money. He's very bankable, but it's not like he's not Tom Cruise. He's not.
Grossed $428 million worldwide.
Wow, how much was the budget on that?
Let's see,
I mean, not that that's a
120 to 140 million.
wow.
Hmm.
I mean, but I mean that's great for fucking Rampage,
Mhm.
giant monkey movie.
Yeah, based on the stupid video game from 35 years ago.
Which is my son's favorite video game. Whenever we go to the barber shop, they have like a little standalone cabinet, and all he wants to do is watch the person smash a. He wants to smash a building, and then he loves it when they get naked. They
Oh.
cover them. He loves it. Loves it. It's his
Beautiful.
best favorite thing. He loves it.
Now,
But go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I'm just going to transition to my second pick because it is
Yeah.
also a wrestler turned actor, but not Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Thank you.
My choice is someone who has arguably been in a bigger franchise than Fast and the Furious, and that is Dave Bautista,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
who transitioned after wrestling to a career as basically playing Drax in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, rest of the MCU, and basically he plays Drax in pretty much every role that he has, as far as I can tell. However, the reason I'm fascinated by him is unlike The Rock, who was a household name as a wrestler,
Sure.
somebody who, even if you weren't a wrestling fan, you knew who The Rock was. Dave Bautista was somebody who was certainly a big top of the line wrestler, but never in my remembering of it, never reached that sort of critical mass of kind of crossing over into the public consciousness. And he never was someone who you looked at and said, that guy's got charisma just oozing out of him like The Rock does. I mean, when you saw The Rock doing wrestling stuff, it was like, okay, he's got so much charisma, you can totally see how he can transition to a Hollywood career.
Yeah.
I mean, Batista was just a big, hulking, set of muscles on a stick that was mainly his main emotion was just angry. And that's what he had. So you wouldn't have pegged him as being guy who goes on to be one of the cornerstones of one of the biggest franchises in movie history. And I think he got very lucky with the role that he got cast in. Because Drax is a very one note type of character. By definition, he has a very set way that he approaches the world. He has a very set way that you have to play him. And he's great at it. He does a great job of that sort of just not getting any subtlety, not understanding any contextual clues, and just plowing through life like a bulldozer. He's great at that. But I mean, if he would have been cast as Star Lord, I think we would have had some problems. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Dave Bautista was the linchpin in my theory that Guardians of the Galaxy succeeded so well because it was The Princess Bride. And there's another wrestler in The Princess Bride who basically plays a irony-free doofus.
Yes, Wallace Shawn.
Yeah, Wallace
noted
Shawn.
wrestler.
I do think Groot is more akin to who Andre the Giant was in The Princess Bride, but I think the role was custom made for him, and as I suspect, Rob Reiner had to do in The Princess Bride. There's a lot of "No, Dave, say it like this" coming from the director to Dave Bautista. And he's smart enough to just kind of go along with it and do what the director says. But yeah, I totally understand. I feel like Dwayne Johnson used wrestling like David Bowie used music, a a way to take his charm and persona and sell it to the world. And it wasn't always about the the medium; it was about his identity, how
Mm.
he could kind of in films. He pretty much plays the same dude over and over again, but it's just a platform for him. But yeah, Bautista, I think in seeing in Glass Onion, there are some moments where he plays a little bit of some emotional notes that are a little bit more nuanced than the kind of irony uh, inept Drax. But yeah, I
Hmm.
totally agree. Totally.
Like I said, it's just fascinating to me that he is far from the person you would have circled as next Hollywood superstar when you saw him in a wrestling ring or cutting promos or things like that. It's just strange how these things work, man. You just happen to have the right look and be able to pull off the right role, and boom, you've got a whole career in front of you.
Yeah, and I think he pretty much did everything but wrestle. But Vin Diesel as Groot in that movie probably has the same range as a Bautista, but
Right.
luckily he doesn't have to do anything other than say I am Groot. Oh, that's fun. Okay, so dudes, we're at halftime, and I'm just going to use this place to invite again to see if anybody wants to suggest a new topic. We'd love to have some guests on the show. We'd love to hear what your suggestions would be for topics. So send them in, and then download, rate, and review past episodes. I think we're just about everywhere you get podcasts. We'd love to hear your opinions. And so now, Michael is going to share his third choice.
My third choice is the wrestler known as Medusa, aka Alundra Blaze,
Oh, I love
aka
this.
who transitioned to a role as a monster truck driver,
Oh,
driving the monster truck Medusa. Didn't stray too far from the formula there. Um, which I it's funny, monster trucks and wrestling always felt like they went hand in hand to me. There's a certain sort of crowd that it appeals to both, but then also I have like these very distinct memories of like watching like Saturday morning wrestling when it used to be on at like 10 or 11 o'clock on whatever channel it was, and it was either preceded or followed by some sort of monster truck rally. Gravedigger was going up against Bigfoot, and I can't remember the names of any other monster trucks. Those are the only two that
Right.
existed at the time. But she started kind of in her post wrestling career around in the late '90s. She started training with the driver, and then within a couple years started winning like freestyle competitions. I guess there's kind of two main um, monster truck exhibitions. There's like races, and then there's freestyle,
hmm.
and then the high dive is the hardest one though. That's the third, where they have to drive all the way up those little um, the ladder, and then the thing. That one's really tough.
There's
But
the compulsory where you have to do the triple sow cow, or you
oh
have to.
yeah, I like when they get just like free drive.
Yeah.
And like they're just having fun at that point.
Yeah, just
Everyone's
showing off.
there's no more real medals to give out, and they're just out there and they're just doing their thing, and they start doing that slow clap, and they get the people to clap. That's good stuff too. But she ended up winning the 2004. I got it written down. World Monster Truck. I don't know the name of it. I gotta look up the name. Monster Jam World. She won the Monster Jam World Finals in freestyle, and then the following year was the first woman to win Monster Jam World Finals in racing. So she like went to the top of the game of driving you know, a truck with giant wheels,
That's
and I
pretty
think
cool.
that's just awesome and so weird for especially for a wrestler. I don't know, Richard. I was never a WCW guy. I
Right.
don't, I don't remember her very much as Medusa or as Alundra Blaze in the WWF. So I don't really know her that well. You know, back in the kind of late '80s, early '90s, women's wrestling wasn't as I don't know respected probably. as it is today, where it's kind of on par with what the men are doing in terms of, um, I don't know, just the entire thing. Sometimes it would be like, oh, here's now that kind of low point, like the late '90s, early 2000s. It's the bikini mud wrestling match,
Yeah, exactly.
kind of that
It,
growth period where it was weird. But before that, it was just like, oh, here's, uh, kind of the Cindy Lauper rock and wrestling, scary Sherry.
Fabulous Moolah.
Yeah. So I don't know her as a wrestler too much, but I'm intrigued by her as a monster truck driver.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I wonder if it seems like some of the persons who we've discussed found a niche, kind of found this kind of opening there. It was almost to their. I know it's never to your benefit. It's always a challenge to enter a world that is mostly um, you're mostly blockaded from joining. But it does seem like Ventura kind of realized that there was this niche that could be filled, and a big personality needed to fill it. So I wonder if that was true with monster trucks, that they needed someone to be kind of break the gender barrier there, and she was ready to do it. It's cool. All right, Richard, what do you got?
All right, so we've been talking a lot about um, second careers of people who became famous through wrestling and then use that fame to be able to do something else. I'd like to talk about someone who had a second career throughout the majority of their wrestling career,
Oh,
because especially back going before the 80s, wrestling was hard to pay the bills doing wrestling. And a lot of even the famous wrestlers had side hustles and second jobs and things that they did. And one of the ones I find most fascinating is Jim Myers, who you may know as George the Animal Steel.
Huh.
If you remember him from the 80s and WWF, he was this kind of hulking, bald. He wound up playing Tor Johnson
Mhm.
in Ed Wood. If that gives you a visual on what George the Animal Steel looked like, had a green tongue, hairy back, and his animal character would be. I know it sounds like I'm describing myself here. I'm not. He was just this sort of mindless, imbecile, wild man who would, you know, eat the turnbuckles and tear up the turnbuckles and do stuff like that. Turns out for the majority of his wrestling career until the mid 80s, he was a high school teacher in
Awesome.
Michigan. He was a physical education teacher. He had graduated from college and actually had a master's in teaching.
I love
And
that.
would just, he would go out on the weekends and hit the road. And then when it wasn't in the summer when he was off at school, working either as the masked student or later on as George the Animal Steel. But most of his kids, because this is before wrestling was on television and it was just, a huge national deal, most of his kids never knew that he was a professional wrestler.
Wow,
It
that's
wasn't
cool.
until he went to WWF in the 80s and then became kind of this big celebrity in terms of wrestling that he wound up being able to make enough money where he could quit teaching. And he loved teaching and said that he was reluctant, I think, to give it up, but eventually the money got to be just too much for him to be able to turn down.
Hmm.
And I just love this idea of just what a split personality you must have to be able to, on one hand, be this completely like wild, abandoned idiot, with reckless abandon sort of character that you have to play day in day out. On the weekends and during the summers and when you're not at school. But then when you're at school, you have to be this kind of quiet authority figure. And
Mhm.
everyone said he was one of the nicest guys in wrestling. And I just love that dichotomy. And I think that just sort of goes to show that, these guys and women are very adept at being able to live these dual lives, especially back in the days when wrestling, before the veil was lifted and it was acknowledged that wrestling was predetermined. Um, that must have been wild just to sort of like live this double life and just hope that nobody went, "Hey, didn't I see you at the Coliseum, Mr. Myers?"
Do you think if you were teaching a more academic-based subject, it would have been more challenging? 'Cause he's teaching gym, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, he
PE?
was a physical and PE teacher.
Yeah. Man, I bet that nobody acted up in that class. Can you
Yeah,
imagine?
everyone climbed that rope when he said to climb that rope, I bet,
Yeah.
or else he would eat the rope.
You would
There's
eat
the
the
thing.
He was underneath you, just chomping it like a string of spaghetti.
Yeah.
Wow. Uh, we know wrestling is a variety of, theater. If was playing Hamlet on the weekend and being a school teacher, it probably would be that shocking to us. But yeah, that's the performance aspect of wrestling is so physically demanding and requires so much of a combative type of kind of attitude. If it's not even it's real war, faking it. But wow, that's pretty cool. I want to see that movie. I want to see that movie.
That's something that I'm pretty sure Kevin James has already
Yeah.
optioned that script. And I didn't realize he was like 50 when he finally started wrestling for WWF back in the 80s and became like a big
Wow.
success. And he talked about that, that it was a young man's game and he was in the ring with these guys who are in their 20s in their prime physical condition. And here he was in his 50s, finally deciding to go on the road full time and make a career out of it when that's something most guys did when they were 20.
Holy smokes! What an interesting story. Um, you remember the band or the group Peaches and Herb?
Yes.
I guess Herb was a bailiff throughout the entire career, and there was about 17 different Peaches.
I knew that Peaches was just like a Menudo thing where they just dropped people into the
Yeah,
role.
yeah. But Herb, whenever he was off the tour, he was a bailiff in Philadelphia or something like that.
Huh. Huh.
Yeah. Okay, Winfield, what is your fourth choice?
You kind of alluded to this just a second ago, Jeff. Diamond Dallas Page is my fourth choice,
Oh yeah.
where
Wow.
he's had a second career as like someone who developed yoga for men,
Hmm.
or tried to kind of lift the veil of yoga being something that only women do by doing his DDP yoga, or I think it was called like regular guy yoga before he kind of rebranded it. But he kind of started doing yoga to help treat like the physical nature of what he had kind of suffered. His injuries in the ring caused a lot of like back problems for him. And so he kind of went on to be kind of like an entrepreneur within like this kind of niche element of like trying to be like a fitness instructor sort of guy or yoga instructor, kind of marketing towards men and towards healing like these very physical um, injuries. And I think that he was like one of these guys too that was also um, very religious. So there's like a kind of a faith sort of element to his teachings and his, uh, trying to get people back and running. I think he was really very noteworthy for um, his friendship and his uh, uh, trying to help kind of a broken down wrestler, Jake the Snake Roberts, in like the
Mhm.
resurrection or something like that of Jake Roberts, which was like a documentary that kind of chronicled him helping out his friend who was going through all like these bouts of alcoholism, but also like just trying to deal with the pain of these guys that land on their back, 100 times a day and get thrown around and smashed and clobbered and whatever. And I think that for someone to um, kind of be transformed by their own pain, and want to help others who have gone through the similar thing and help people and kind of step into a role that um, probably at first was very uncomfortable. Um, there's so much like this weird toxic masculinity that kind of still lingers and uh, kind of is pervasive in society. And for a guy to be like, okay, I'm going to do this thing, and then maybe I'll rebrand it as like a masculine sort of version of this thing, but basically you're still doing child's pose and
Yeah.
butterfly pose and all these different things that you're just like, oh, all right, now it's the I don't know, scorpion deathlock
Mm.
pose. It's like you're doing downward dog or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's kind of neat that he got to a point in his career where uh, I I can't be in the ring throwing my body around, but I can help people either who have done wrestling or like all the other physical jobs that people do, whether they're I don't know, lugging boxes and doing things that this sort of thing is uh, I don't know, helpful. Seems like a
Oh yeah. What a more like to be able to have something save you um, from because he was seriously debilitated, I think, and I know Jake the Snake was too.
Yeah, Jake the
Like
Snake basically credits him with saving his life because not
yeah.
only was he crippled, basically, he was also, deeply addicted to drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
he
I looked it
basically
up today. I couldn't believe that Jake the Snake Roberts is still alive.
alive and still doing wrestling stuff.
It's
He was managing an AEW for a
I
while.
I cannot believe it. I was like, of course, I was like, oh god, what year did he die? And it's like, still alive.
Still alive.
Holy moly!
And I
Yeah,
think
he
that
basically moved in with DDP, and DDP basically through the yoga and sort of personal sort of guidance got him clean and sober, got his body working properly again, and yeah, just really kind of turned his life around.
yeah, what amazing thing because essentially you're it's like working with doing things to help war veterans or persons with PTSD. It's just it's incredible the spiritual aspects of or the I guess they're spiritual the holistic aspects of the of yoga. I think got to be an amazing thing for somebody who has you know abused disconnected themselves with from their body with substances in order to withstand the abuse that they have to give to their body. So wow, what a cool thing to give to the world and to kind of it's almost like when they try to sell foreign food like I think on the Simpsons they were joking that pita was pocket bread. It's almost like you're trying to sell something, make something seem less scary and mystical in order to get people to do this thing that's good for them. So
Right.
that's wonderful. Richard, did you have one more?
I have one more,
Okay, okay.
and it is a part-time wrestler, full-time manager, um, the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, known through the 80s and 90s for his bullhorn that he would use to yell at his his charges opponents
Mhm.
and also smash them with occasionally. But his secret talent was music.
Oh,
People may not know this, but he was in a band called the Gentrys in the
oh yeah,
60s,
yeah.
and you might know them from the million-selling record "Keep on Dancing."
Okay.
And he was one of the singers in the Gentrys when they had that big, huge hit single. And the leader of the group, the wonderfully named Larry Raspberry, wound up leaving the group, and he took over as the lead singer. And they had some minor hits. They actually released their version of Neil Young's "Cinnamon Girl" before Neil Young's version was released as a single.
Hmm.
And you know what? It's not bad. It's really pretty good. And even after going into the wrestling world, Jimmy Hart kept his kind of finger in the music world as well, specifically composing the theme songs for a lot of the wrestlers during in WWF during the 80s and 90s, including the Honky Tonk Man, one of my personal favorites. If you remember, he had this sort of like rockabilly Elvis look, and so the
Mhm.
song was this very rockabilly influenced sort of song. And perhaps most notably, Shawn Michaels' entrance theme, "Sexy Boy," one of the one of the most embarrassing slash greatest wrestling songs ever. And he
Well,
was
that's
also
awesome.
and he was also a member of the wrestling boot band when noted racist Hulk Hogan created an album called in 1995 called Hulk Rules. He was part of the band.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Jimmy Hart, a real Renaissance man.
Hmm. Do you think see any? It's a performance. Do you see any connections between performing and music and wrestling?
Well, I think musicians, especially singers, have to be sort of these larger in life personas.
Yeah.
So I think especially when you're a manager and your whole job is to make someone else look great,
Hmm.
you have to be sort of this big braggadocio, kind of big talking, you
Yeah.
know, you got to have a lot of ego, I think, not just you have to project that onto that character that you're doing
Hmm.
when you're managing. So I think particularly being a manager, there's a lot of connections with that and being a performer in a previous life.
Yeah. Had you shown me a photo of David Lee Roth and I had not known he was in a band called Van Halen, I would have guessed that he was a wrestler from
Oh, sure.
some, yeah.
Him and Mickey Rourke from The Wrestler nowadays.
Yeah.
There's some similarities there in the look. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I think I brought him up on one of these podcasts before, and that's musician turns. I guess the topic was wrestlers, not persons who worked in wrestling. But when I had learned Bob Mould had worked um,
As a
for,
writer for WCW, yeah.
yeah, I thought that was, and this story talks about. I think he's in like he was working there for like a week, and he has to pitch bits to Hulk Hogan, and he said Hulkster was kind of looking at him like, "Who the fuck are you? I don't
Yeah.
have no idea." And then later on, somebody said, "No, Hulk. He's touring entertainer. He's got records that hit the top of these college charts and stuff like that." Afterwards, Hulk was cool with him, but um, for somebody to kind of understand that, especially in that era that he was doing it, this was a way for Bob Mould to ascend in the ranks of entertainment. Like he'd been playing kind of small clubs and things like that for a long time, but I imagine working in WCW, maybe it wasn't WWE or whatever, but it was still probably bigger than the venues that he'd been
Oh,
playing
sure.
in. So yeah. Well, this was a fun topic. Let's go with I ain't got time to bleed or lead. There's your governor, Jesse Ventura. And I think Dave Bautista, because he's pretty prominent, and Dwayne the Rock Johnson, pretty prominent. And I maybe just because of the amount of I really liked the kind of the second act story that was represented by Jim Myers, George the Animal Steel. So I think is that our slate?
That's our
Ooh,
slate.
okay,
That's our card for tonight.
that's our card.
And also,
This is
Michael will be wrestling a bear later on.
oh my god, I can't wait.
What? What now?
I can't wait
Um,
for the North
I
Hollywood.
thought I was going to be watching the show The Bear.
The bear.
Oh no!
Oh
Oh fuck!
no. Oh, oh.
I was going to do that for 2 hours.
This has been the Mount Rushmore of the thing that we do. I am always Jeff.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael.